Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington. Here we talk all things cloud, and we're going for a different topic today. I guess we focused on topics before like agile, like DevOps, and thinking about iterations and how we build software. But we haven't really thought about the idea of how we maybe prove those ideas that we're working on, how we figure out and validate an idea, let's say. So there's this concept of rapid prototyping that maybe you've heard of it before, maybe you've seen it in passing, but perhaps you haven't experimented with it so much yourself. Well, I'm delighted today to be joined by Andrew Greenstein to talk all about rapid prototyping. Wow, easy for you to say, to validate your ideas. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, harder to do than to say, prototyping.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Chris.
Let's kick off first with who you are and your background.
Sure. My name's Andrew Greenstein. I'm the CEO of SF AppWorks. We're a technical agency. We help companies build websites and apps and all sorts of technical things. And oftentimes, and we're a very agile team, we're always trying to find ways to experiment and iterate and rapid prototype. So we've got some thoughts on that. Also a host of a product podcast myself called The Next Great Thing.
Super.
And yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. We'll have to make sure we get that in the show notes as well. So make sure we get a link to that for you as well.
Cool.
Awesome. So then rapid prototyping, I guess maybe let's start there just as a concept, because some folks might not be aware of it. They can probably infer what it means, but what does it mean to you?
It means a lot of different things to a lot of people. And I think there's a big delineation between whether you're talking about software or hardware prototyping. Mm-hmm. When we talk about it, we talk about software. And even within our own definition, there's a few ways we go about doing it. Rapid prototyping could just be, I have no idea what I want to do. I'm going to test ideas in as quickly as way as possible. And I'm going to do this through clickable prototypes and a design sprint. That's one type of rapid prototyping. When you're more evolved in what you're building, maybe you have more resources in the team, rapid prototyping could mean, hey, we've got our core product. We need to figure out our next killer feature. How can we create an environment where we're testing and building a lot of things in concert, side by side, in an iterative way? And then the third way we use to talk about it is when we want to test a platform. It's almost like a proof of concept. So imagine we're trying to figure out how to use AI to identify something in an image. We might rapid prototype a few solutions on 3 different AI platforms to see which one works the best for our particular needs. So all 3 of those, in our definition, are rapid prototyping, and the way we deploy it depends on what our particular goal is.
Gotcha. So then you can flex between which option you're talking about there. But I guess fundamentally, there's an element in there of, I suppose, experimenting. Not necessarily having the answer, but probably having a question or hypothesis and then moving from that, I'd say.
Yeah, you nailed it, Chris. It's definitely about exploration. I'm a fan of Agile, a student of Agile and Lean.
Yep.
And one of the founding fathers of Agile is Kent Beck, and he talks about the product development triathlon. Excuse me. So whenever you're building something, there's sort of 3 phases to product development. The first phase is the exploration phase. And that's the risky search for a viable investment. And by definition, it's unpredictable. So the highest expected value strategy is to reduce the cost of experimentation. So you want to put as little investment into as many uncorrelated experiments as you can. And if you're lucky, and you need to be lucky, one of these will turn out to be unexpectedly successful. That's when you get to the second phase. You turn on the expand. Now, expand is all about growth. Think, Pokemon, when they had their first IR game and it started just rocking and it was scaling the systems, remove the bottlenecks, or imagine Facebook once it caught on, it's a totally different game in terms of product development focused on expansion. And then lastly, it's extract, when you're just trying to squeeze any more lemon juice out of the lemon. This is about maximizing value. You have a playbook at this point. You beef up your marketing. You roll out your product to a new city. So that's where you are. And in rapid prototyping, we're always in the explore phase.
Gotcha. Well, I guess there's still some of that mentality from the rapid prototyping that we can bring towards that whole life cycle, because there's this idea of shipping to learn and trying to understand whether something is right for your end users, whether it's not. So even if you've gone past that prototyping stage and you're maybe productionizing it into something which is what you think that end product will look like, there's no reason why you still can't change course. And again, coming back to that idea of agile there as well.
Yeah, definitely from an organizational perspective, I think you're always balancing the three. But it's helpful, I found, to understand which phase you're in any particular moment. And that might be like you as a team member, like what's your job? Are you here to explore? Are you here to expand or extract? Or where's your strength? And then, as you're looking at your overall company success, you might have your core product that's in expansion mode, but you still need to figure out your next thing to stay ahead of the competition. So that's exploration. And by the way, let's also extract, the value we can from something else. So yeah, I think you're balancing the three. Nice.
And you mentioned there about, having a product which is in maybe one of those phases. So are you looking at this kind of rapid prototyping idea at a product level rather than say features? I guess probably depends on size and maybe what you're working on.
Definitely. I think with some of our clients, when we're at the earliest stage and we don't know what we're trying to build yet, then rapid prototyping is often around building different concepts, brainstorming different concepts. We love to use design sprints, which is basically a framework for coming up with new ideas in a 1 week period. You start by interviewing experts and understanding the why of what you're trying to accomplish. And then you get into competitive research and everyone does these quick 3-minute lightning demos. You get up to speed with the industry. Awesome. And then you do brainstorming apart, which is, I'm a big believer in as well. I think a lot of times people want to get in a room and brainstorm, come up with an idea. In a design sprint, everyone brainstorms alone. Then they come together, they share their ideas, and they iterate. And we've found that to be really effective. Then you start doing quick solution sketches, just 3-panel storyboards of your ideas. If it's a coffee shop and you're trying to build a new website, maybe it's like step 1, someone sees an article in a newspaper. Step 2, they come to your website. Step 3, they purchase some coffee. That's your nice concept. And then you pick the user story you want to focus on, the user journey you want to focus on, and then you can build out a whole 15-board storyboard, clickable prototype that you then test with users. They test with users. So,
and I love what you said there as well about the separately kind of mind mapping and coming together with those different ideas, because I think there's something in that if you bring that all together too early, maybe you're going to have certain personas or certain folks who maybe are a bit more vocal than others, or it's going to influence other people's creativity as well. So I love that aspect of what you said in there as well.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, speaks to group dynamics. Some people love to speak in a group, and they will dominate the conversation, and that can be helpful sometimes. But some people don't feel as comfortable, and when put on the spot, they're not trying to take that spotlight. If you tell everyone to go home and come up with 3 ideas and bring them in and go around the table, I think everyone gets a chance to speak, and that helps with both diversity of thought and equality.
Yeah, gotcha. Understood. So then if we maybe make a more tangible scenario and maybe think of like a fictitious organization. Let's pick something like, I don't know, a financial organization, because typically there's some legacy in that environment, but there's the kind of fintech scene as well, where they are, they've got these brand new competitors who are doing innovative things. How would they start on this kind of process, let's say? What would be the journey for them if they've never explored rapid prototyping before?
So one model we've had success with in this more established environment is you basically set up a rapid prototyping team. So that can be 2 to 4 developers, could be more, but 2 to 4 developers, a researcher, product person, and designer, maybe a tester, and you put them into a team, and then you basically start this brainstorm ideation process. I do think in general, as a concept, you need to get buy-in around your organization, or else you're going to be this pariah of a group out there wasting money building things. So like from the very start, this group is like tasked with, hey, let's get everyone involved. And that's where you go around and you're talking to everyone about what have you already done? What have you tried in the past? What do you want to see? How can we keep you? If you get buy-in from everyone, then they're not going to immediately try to discredit what you're doing. So that's important. But then you just start. The idea is you just want to start building as fast as possible. You are the scientist and you have hypothesis. So maybe one of your ideas is, hey, I think a value-based platform would be really cool. A value-based investing platform. Another idea is like what we really need is an app where people can send money to each other and. So you can start to identify your ideas, but instead of picking one and being like, okay, we're going to go with the app first, that's our priority, and we're going to build it out to its full fruition. You would instead say, okay, well, what do we like? Why do we think people would want an app to transfer money? You look at the competitors. Okay, why won't they use PayPal or Venmo or Zelle or some of these other things? And you say, well, because we have our own customer base and we think that we can serve them within our own experience. Well, you might be able to test that before you build anything. You might be able to build, a prototype of an app that just says, "Hey, I value or transfer money now, save 1%, and put it out to like 100 of your users and let them click the link. And if they click it, maybe they go to a screen that says, "This is a new feature coming out soon. Sign up for more." Those 100 people will be a little disappointed, but you'll at least be able to see if the value proposition at least resonated with them. Then you go to the next step, right? Okay, no, people actually do want to try this out, or maybe the value-based investing. Maybe that's where you build a clickable prototype, and maybe you build a very, very simple application of the experience. And so you're trying to break it down in as small pieces as possible, so that it's like if you're on a ladder and you fall off the first step, no big deal. If you wait till you're on the 50th step, you're dead. So. You want to try falling off the ladder earlier.
Understood. And this is, I think, one of the key things, isn't it? Is because it's experimentation, there's going to be failure. There's going to be those times where certain ideas, certain prototypes, certain things just don't work. And I think in the R&D world, that's just accepted. That's normal. That's kind of cost of research and development. I think from a software engineering perspective, there's always failure is sometimes seen as a bit of a dirty word, isn't it? If like we try something out and it doesn't see the light of day, it's almost like, oh well, that was a mistake. Why did we do that? Love your perspective on that.
Well, there's a sweet spot too, because you don't want to fail all the time. Inventing a new product, you probably will fail 99 out of 100 times, but you don't want to fail all the time in building something. But if you don't fail at all, then you're never going to take any chances. So, of course, there's a sweet spot, and you got to figure out where that sweet spot is for your organization.
Yeah, understood. Let's move on then to, I think in the blurb you mentioned kind of a concrete example with an innovation team at West Elm. So maybe let's try and ground some of what we've talked about there in that example.
Yeah, so West Elm did what we just talked about. They wanted to build a bunch of products. They weren't sure exactly which one were going to get the most value for them. And so they wanted to try experimenting with all of them. And so they had this head of innovation at the time, Luke, who's a really brilliant guy. And he came to us and said, "Hey, I want to build all these things. Can you be our implementers?" And we said yes. And so we started coming up with ideas. And they wanted to build a chatbot for customer support. They got like 35 million customer support messages a year, and they wanted to reduce that. And they also wanted to build an AI matcher where you could submit a Pinterest board and it would return a furniture that matched the look and feel of that. And they wanted and they wanted to build AR and VR experiences and 3D pillows you could like rotate around and put in ad units and all sorts of things. But they didn't try to build just one, and they went right to it. And we talked about failure. Well, sometimes like failure is the pivot or the opportunity. And so the customer service chatbot was a good example. It was actually not very helpful, meaning people got frustrated. I think when you contact customer service, you're already frustrated and you're not getting what you want. And so it wasn't helpful in that context, but we were able to, through experimentation, pivot it to how about a chatbot that could help do some basic design guidance. And that was actually more helpful because I think the state of mind when you come to a chatbot, are you there to complain about something and get your problem fixed, or are you just looking for a little help? So we were able to pivot that one a little bit. the AI Pinterest matcher, super cool idea. Tested out with like small email batches of a couple hundred people. Didn't really sell a lot, but people loved talking about it, and it got a lot of buzz, and eventually it landed them a piece in Fast Company. And so it was like, okay, so it didn't raise the needle in terms of revenue, but it got them some really great press, and that's a different form of success than what they anticipated. And then finally, one of the things that we built with them is the progressive web app, which is kind of combining a mobile and a web experience. You get some native functionality, but you don't have to download or install anything. And that kind of took off for them. That was if you're lucky, you will find something that works, and then you need to grow. So they were able to increase revenue per user by 8% and time spent on site by 17%. And as soon as those results came in, there was a lot of conversations, and that thing kind of went straight to production in some of the other areas of the company. So it's cool to see how failure can turn into an unexpected success can turn into expand, and other failures just you can and move on.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just to help us out a bit there, what were the timeframes of some of those different prototypes?
The whole engagement was several years, I'd say. 3 years. It's not something you're going to get right away. Sometimes, actually, I think the progressive web app was one of our first experiments. But the other ones that were iterative over many, many years, and even the progressive web app, it wasn't like we were like, we're done, let's move on. It was like, okay, we got a lead on some success. Now we got to keep iterating on that in itself. So the whole engagement was several years. And everything was constantly in experimentation and iteration mode. Nothing was ever done.
Gotcha. And to go back to something you said earlier as well, that I think it was the kind of chatbot room you mentioned, the failure. Again, people think of failure as a bad thing. Failure is not good. We never want to fail, but actually, from that failure, you got a brand new success. You got a brand new opportunity, and I think there's this, there's this kind of mindset of growth mindset we hear in the industry that actually failing is okay. You learn from that failure, but you've even got something more than just a learning from that. You've got a brand new opportunity that you haven't even thought of as probably an idea or an experiment in the first instance, but because you took that first step, you look at that, you go, we iterate on this. There's actually something new that we can do there. So it's a really interesting way of looking at that.
To go a step further, it's actually one of the things that makes entrepreneurs entrepreneurs. There's this fascinating study done by this professor, Dr. Saraswati, and she basically wanted to study how entrepreneurs succeed, how they operate. So she studied 1,000 of them, I think, and came up with a hypothesis for what makes entrepreneurs. And she called it effectuation theory. And the basic premise of effectuation theory is that causal thinkers believe they can predict the future based on past events, meaning you start with your end goal. I want to build $1 billion company. And then you have to figure out what the path to get to that goal is. But effectual thinkers don't think that way. They think that the future is unpredictable, but in a way you can control it. And the overall thing is called the pilot in the plane. You're not flying to one airport. You're up in the air looking around saying, where do I want to go? What looks nice? And so instead of saying I'm going to build $1 billion company, you say, I'm going to build something. I don't know exactly where it ends. Might be $1 billion company, might be something different that's also equally interesting. So then they broke this into 4 different concepts that I think are just really helpful for anyone thinking entrepreneurial. The bird in the hand is the first one. When you start an entrepreneurial journey, you start by taking stock of what you have. Assets, network, ideas, advantages, the resources at hand. Second one is called the lemonade principle. So this is talking about failure, right? Entrepreneurs expect failure. They expect things to go poorly. They just don't know what or when. And so instead of worrying about it, when something bad happens, they look for the opportunity. They look for, to make lemonade of lemons. So just saying to yourself, hey, things are going to go poorly. As soon as they do, look around and say, where's my opportunity? Okay, the chatbot didn't work for customer service. Is there something else it could work for? The third one's called the crazy quilt. And this one is that you don't go and look for partnerships that help you achieve your means. You actually go and look for the best partnerships you can find and you let that dictate where you're going to go. So the partners that come on board determine the goals and the direction, not the other way around, so long as they're willing to invest something meaningful. And then the last one is the affordable loss theory. You don't invest more than you can afford to lose.
Gotcha. No, that's wise words for anyone there as well. If we look kind of the flip side, we were just talking about the failure aspect, but the success. When you're figuring out these rapid prototypes and you're coming up with the design, how much would you say you focus on what that end success is going to look like? Like, I think you mentioned about the AR kind of experience, the VR kind of experience with the cushions, etc. Great piece in terms of innovation, etc., but didn't really bring the revenue in. So was that something where beforehand there was a lot of thought in terms of what a success looks like? How do we kind of qualify this and quantify this? Or, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what's like your definition of done, and you decide, right, this prototype we're taking forward? How do you figure that bit out?
So I guess it goes back to the, nothing's ever really done thing. Oftentimes people will come to us and say, I've got an app idea and I've got $50,000 and I want to build it. And I'm like, it's not an app idea. It's a business you're starting. You're trying to start a whole new business. You're not going to ever go and start a business and say, I've got $50,000. That's it. I'm all in. Let's go. You're going to say, okay, well, I need an investment and I need to last as long as I can until I can get the next investment. So I think it's no different when you're building software. There's a huge payout, right? That's why all these companies have incredible valuations, because software scales. So if you can figure it out, the payoff is astronomical. But why would you think that you could figure it out in 3 months and then just be done investing and count the cash flowing? And it just doesn't make sense to me. So I think that, the first thing is you buckle up. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be a long one. And if you're not thinking about how am I going to survive for 5 to 7 years, then you're already not thinking about it correctly in terms of starting something new. Yeah.
Gotcha. So reshape expectations then to focus less on it's almost a short term versus a long term, isn't it? It's reframing the context of the decision you're making and that project you're embarking on. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then you'll define what success looks like. Maybe, for West Elm, maybe they were like, look, for this to justify our investment, or at least our prioritization on the AR piece over some other thing we're experimenting with, I need to see it's going to make some revenue. And maybe they realize it wasn't. Well, why are other companies doing it? Maybe that their goal is different. Maybe they wanted the press. When I see, Walmart labs building crazy stuff like, hey, we now have a robot that walks through aisles to check stock. That's not in production. That's a concept. And, it's cool that they're testing these things out, but I think they know that's probably not going to be in every Walmart this year. It's more of a concept and it can get us some press. So, again, it's figure out what your goal is, what you need to sustain this, how much you can invest, where your partnerships are. If someone's like, hey, I've got a robot and I'll willing to roll it out for you and you don't have to do any work. This is kind of the whole point of you put it all together and you figure out where you're going to point the plane.
Yeah, there's many different aspects on there. Revenue is one success indicator, but something like that could be, the brand reputation. But what does brand reputation mean? Is it about being able to attract talent acquisition, or retaining talent, and all these things as well? So you can almost build up this spider web and mind map of different success criteria than the immediate one that you might think of there as well.
Yeah, we occasionally do a newsletter called The Wonder. And in the early days, The Wonder was just about finding the coolest technology we could find, stuff that sounded super sci-fi. And it would be articles about, we're now mounting video cameras on bees, or, hey, here's a new noise canceling window. And so often these stories would come out of MIT labs or Google. Yeah. And I realized both of those organizations are our brand is, we're doing really cool stuff. You want to come here. And so they're when they're picking their experiments, they're doesn't sound cool enough. How about lasers on frogs? Can we do something there? It's got to sound great.
And it's funny, right? Because I guess this maybe talks to the background that I've come from in terms of organizations I've worked with, the education, et cetera, et cetera. But, things like that in my mind, I'm That's an interesting idea. How do you arrive at that? But this is part of that creativity process, isn't it? Is that prototyping of all ideas on the table, let's figure something out and keep iterating.
They're probably measuring clicks and also measuring applicants. Like, hey, how many articles did that one clip get? And did we get any additional applications or clicks, to our application website from that? So yeah, totally different metric, totally different success.
Gotcha. No, awesome. No, good. So as we start, I guess, wrapping up here, and really awesome session, really insightful here. Let's assume I'm one of those organizations, or I'm a team, or even just an individual who's developing day to day. And I'm listening to this conversation. I'm thinking, wow, this is super interesting. This is something that I want to get started with. Is there like a call to action? Is there something which they could go and take a look at? They could familiarize themselves with? What would be your maybe a couple of points of wisdom to leave them with here, Andrew?
For someone wanting to start something new?
Yeah, well, something like this, yeah, because it might be a completely different way of working for them.
Yeah, I do think a lot of this is sort of the Nike slogan, just do it. I think there's a lot of good information out there, a lot of great books. Design Sprint by Jake Knapp, or maybe it's just called Sprint, is a really good handbook for how to do a design sprint, and that can get you started and sort of geared towards people in an organization that need to build up some support. Lean Startup, an old classic, of course. But there's endless material to read. I think at some point, while it's helpful to read, you need to start doing. You need to just start building it. So just think about the smallest way you could test something, whatever that is, and just do it.
Thinking of those iterations, and you got to start somewhere. So there we go. Super. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. Really, really insightful discussion there. I appreciate you coming on and talking all about rapid prototyping with us. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So there we go, folks. We've been learning all about rapid prototyping. We've gone from really understanding what it is as a concept, going through the journey and understanding some of those various stages, understanding that ultimately, you know what, it's all about just going and doing it, starting somewhere, being aware that failure is something that's going to happen. And actually, you know what, it's not something to be feared, it's something to be embraced. And actually, who knows what great ideas we're going to get from that. So again, thank you, Andrew, for the great session. Again, we'll make sure the podcast details are in the show notes as well as some of the other details there. But otherwise, folks, stay safe, stay healthy, and until the next session, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.